Before the empire, there was chaos. Actium decides the fate of empires. Rome was never just a city. Rome is not eternal. Rome is bleeding, but that is only part of the story. The eternal city is consumed by fire. Statues are shattered. The golden eagle, it lies there, buried in the ashes. Rome, the empire that once brought the world to its knees, is falling. But why? Was it arrogance? Betrayal? Greed? Or is it simply the fate of every empire to rise and then fall? In this cinematic journey, we travel back in time more than 1,000 years to the muddy banks of the Tiber, where a pair of twins suckled by a wolf would spark the legend of a civilization unlike any other. We will witness the rise of the Republic, the clash of swords with the Gauls, the cunning of Hannibal, and the ambition of Caesar. From the blood-soaked arena to the marble halls of Augustus's palace, from civil wars to the Golden Age, we'll follow every triumph and tragedy that shaped the Roman Empire. And in the end, we'll watch the Western world collapse in silence while the Eastern fire continues to burn. This is more than history. It's a story of power, ambition, glory, and ruin. Stick with us until the end, and you'll understand why Rome never really died. Because in many ways, we still live in its shadow. This is the glorious history of Rome. And it all begins now. Before legions marched across continents and emperors etched their names into stone, there was only a hill and a myth. According to legend, Rome began with two abandoned twins, Romulus and Remus, nursed by a she-wolf, destined for greatness. It's a tale soaked in prophecy and blood, a fitting origin for a civilization that would be both majestic and merciless. But behind the myth lies a far grittier truth. The world Rome was born into. It was the 8th century BCE. The Mediterranean world was a fragmented mosaic of cultures. The powerful Greeks flourished in the east. The mysterious Etruscans dominated central Italy. Phoenician traders sailed the seas, and tribal peoples like the Sabines and Latins warred over scraps of fertile land. Rome was born in this crucible, a tiny settlement on 7 hills, perched above the Tiber River. It had no wealth, no prestige, no future, at least not yet. But what it had, more than any other city, was a brutal, relentless will to survive. The earliest Romans were not noble philosophers or master engineers. They were farmers, warriors, and survivors, hardened by scarcity and warfare. They fought not for glory, but for existence. At first, Rome was ruled by kings. Some were Roman, some Etruscan. One, Tarquinius Superbus, ruled with such arrogance and cruelty that the people revolted. According to tradition, in 509 BCE, the monarchy was overthrown, and the Roman Republic was born. But this wasn't democracy as we know it. The Republic was a complex, ruthless system designed to distribute power without allowing anyone to fully possess it. The Senate held enormous sway, and 2 consuls were elected annually to check each other. Behind the elegant facade of liberty, the truth was far murkier. Power belonged to Rome's aristocratic elite, the patricians, while the lower classes, the plebeians, struggled for a voice. What followed was a constant internal battle, not just against foreign enemies, but against inequality, corruption, and ambition. Conquest and conflict. Rome's early wars were local, against neighboring tribes and cities, but victory bred confidence. With each war, the Romans absorbed new land, new people, and new ideas. Crucially, they offered citizenship, or a version of it, to those they conquered, creating a web of loyalty that few empires ever matched. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in central Italy. But then came a challenge that would shape everything: Carthage. The Punic Wars were not mere battles, they were existential struggles. Carthage was rich, seafaring, and terrifyingly sophisticated. Rome, outmatched at sea, built a navy from scratch. When Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants, Rome endured. When Carthage nearly shattered the Republic, Rome responded by razing the city to the ground, salted earth and all. It was a message to the world: defy Rome, and you will be erased. Roman society was built around one fundamental truth: everything serves the state. Boys were raised to be soldiers, fathers had absolute power over their families. Religion, law, and culture were all designed to maintain order, and order meant survival. The Roman road wasn't just for trade, it was for marching troops. The aqueduct wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was proof of imperial control over nature. Even the Latin language was a tool of domination, spreading Roman ideals from Britain to the Middle East. And while the Republic prided itself on law and virtue, it was equally a system of opportunism and ambition. Generals like Scipio Africanus, Marius, and later Julius Caesar realized that real power didn't lie in the Senate. It lay in the loyalty of the legions, and that would change everything. As Rome expanded, so did inequality. Conquests brought wealth, but it flowed to the elite. Slaves flooded the countryside, displacing free farmers. The once proud middle class was vanishing. Meanwhile, populist leaders, called populares, rose to challenge the old order, promising land, reform, and revenge. The Republic was cracking under its own weight. Loyalty to the state was fading. Loyalty to individuals was rising. And the question that haunted Rome was no longer how to conquer, but how to control what it had conquered. A ticking time bomb. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was the most powerful republic the world had ever seen, and also the most fragile. Behind its temples and triumphs lay tension, paranoia, and blood. Senators plotted in marble halls. Generals amassed private armies. The streets of Rome echoed with riots, assassinations, and betrayal. It was a civilization on the brink, a republic gasping for breath in an age of ambition. And looming just beyond the horizon was the man who would destroy it to save it. It began with a man whose name would echo for millennia, and an idea that would shake the very foundations of the Republic. In 60 BCE, 3 ambitious men, Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, formed an unofficial alliance historians would later call the First Triumvirate. Each had something to gain. Crassus had wealth, Pompey had military glory, and Caesar had nothing to lose but everything to prove. This was not just a political pact, it was a conspiracy against the Republic itself. At first, the arrangement worked. With the support of his powerful allies, Caesar secured the consulship in 59 BCE. But what he really wanted lay beyond the political games of Rome: military conquest, public adoration, and absolute control. And so he set his eyes on Gaul. Caesar in Gaul, the making of a legend. Modern-day France and Belgium was a land of tribes, forests, and warriors. Most Romans considered it a dangerous, uncivilized frontier, but Caesar saw it differently, a stage for transformation. From 58 BCE to 50 BCE, he led a brutal, brilliant campaign across the region. He fought not just battles, but wars of narrative, sending detailed, dramatic commentaries of his victories back to Rome. These weren't dry reports. They were propaganda, shaping public opinion, inflating his image, and making him a hero to the masses. He claimed to fight for Rome, but with every legion he commanded, every tribe he crushed, Caesar was building something far more dangerous than glory, a personal army. By the end of the Gallic Wars, over 1 million Gauls were dead or enslaved. Caesar had become a god to his men and a threat to his peers. In Rome, Caesar's rise sent shivers through the Senate. He had grown too powerful, too popular, too independent. Worse yet, Crassus was now dead, and tensions with Pompey, once his ally, were rapidly turning to rivalry. The balance had shifted. In 50 BCE, the Senate, increasingly controlled by Pompey and Caesar's enemies, delivered a clear ultimatum: disband your army and return to Rome as a private citizen. To obey meant humiliation and likely prosecution. To defy meant war. The Rubicon, point of no return. It was night. The sky hung heavy over the river Rubicon. Caesar stood silent, his horse pawing the wet earth. Behind him, his most loyal legions waited. He knew the law. No Roman general was allowed to bring armed troops into Italy. Crossing the Rubicon with his army would be an act of treason, a declaration of civil war. But Caesar also knew something else. The Republic was already dying, rotted from within by corruption, elitism, and fear. If he didn't act, he would be destroyed. And so, with quiet conviction, he gave the order. Alia iacta est. The die is cast. He crossed the Rubicon, and with it, crossed into a new age of Roman history. Rome descends into chaos. Panic erupted in Rome. Pompey, once the Republic's greatest general, fled south, regrouping his forces in Greece. The Senate crumbled into confusion. Caesar, with calculated speed, swept through Italy, facing little resistance. He wasn't just marching with soldiers. He was marching with an idea that one man could save Rome from itself. But this was no simple coup. It was the beginning of a civil war that would engulf the entire Mediterranean. From Spain to Greece, from North Africa to the shores of Egypt, Roman killed Roman in the name of saving Rome. Caesar's brilliance as a general became undeniable. He crushed Pompey's allies in Hispania, then crossed the Adriatic to confront the man himself. At Pharsalus in 48 BCE, vastly outnumbered, Caesar's forces defeated Pompey's legions in a stunning tactical masterpiece. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping for sanctuary. But there, in a twist that shocked even Caesar, he was murdered by the Egyptian king, desperate to curry favor. When Caesar arrived, he was handed Pompey's severed head. He wept, not for the man, but for the meaning. Rome had killed one of its greatest sons, not in battle, but in betrayal. In Egypt, another chapter began. Caesar met Cleopatra, the exiled queen embroiled in her own civil war. Brilliant, cunning, and unyieldingly charismatic, she struck an alliance with Caesar that was equal parts strategic and romantic. Together they seized Alexandria, crushed her rivals, and solidified her rule. Their union produced a son, Caesarion, further complicating the already fragile balance of Roman politics. But Caesar could not stay in Egypt forever. Rome needed him and feared him. He returned not as a general, but as a dictator, a man with more power than any Roman since the founding of the Republic. This was the moment everything changed. The Republic wasn't conquered in a single battle. It was abandoned, piece by piece, by the very men sworn to protect it. And Julius Caesar, once a tool of the system, had become its master. But the gods of Rome never allowed one man to hold too much power for too long. The Ides of March were still far away, but already the storm was building. When Julius Caesar returned to Rome in 46 BCE, he was no longer merely a conqueror. He was Rome incarnate. The Senate named him dictator, perpetuo, dictator for life. Statues of Caesar stood among the gods. His face was stamped on coins. His word overruled law. But for every admirer shouting his name in the forum, there was a whisper in the shadows. Is this still a republic, or the birth of a monarchy in disguise? Rebuilding Rome, or remaking it? Caesar saw himself as a reformer. He slashed debts, reorganized the calendar, extended citizenship to the provinces, and restructured the Senate, filling its ranks with loyalists from across the empire. He wanted a Rome that worked, not one crippled by tradition. To many, he was a savior. To others, a tyrant. The Senate grew restless. Brutus, Cassius, and other staunch Republicans, men Caesar once considered friends, began to conspire. They did not hate Caesar the man, but Caesar the idea, a single ruler above all others, and they knew what had to be done. But Caesar was not oblivious. He had heard the rumors, he had seen the glances, and yet he did nothing. Why? Because he believed Rome would never betray him. He was wrong. March 15th, 44 BCE, the Curia of Pompey, a place soaked in irony. As Caesar entered the chamber, he was surrounded, seemingly by routine Senate business. But then steel flashed in the torchlight. The first knife struck his shoulder. He turned, confused, betrayed. A second blade plunged into his side. Panic rippled through the room. And then he saw him, Brutus, his friend, his protege. Et tu, Brute? It wasn't a question, it was the end. 23 stab wounds, a lifeless body at the base of Pompey's statue, a dictator slain in the name of liberty. But Caesar's death didn't restore the Republic, it shattered it. Chaos in the streets, Rome in freefall. The assassins expected to be hailed as heroes. Instead, the city turned on them. Caesar had not just ruled Rome, he had fed it, entertained it, and embodied its glory. The people mourned, rioted. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general and master manipulator, delivered the funeral oration that would seal their fate. He held up Caesar's bloodied toga,